Hello, hello. How are you? Wherever you may be joining from, I hope that you are dry. I hope that you are warm. I hope that you are supported and hope that you feel loved because that is the focus of today's LinkedIn Live. And I'll tell you, I am coming to you from Los Angeles and we are in the middle of our winter storm season. I don't know if you know anything about Los Angeles and our storm seasons, but they are rare, these winter storms. When they come, they are fierce. And so we are dealing with our share of rainfall, which we need in this, I want to say at this point, 12 years, something epic drought. We need this water, but it does hit our communities hard. So keep us in your thoughts. Keep our roofs in your thoughts because we need that too. One thing that I will say is that if you are joining us from Facebook or from LinkedIn, you will need to authorize StreamYard so that you can comment. So go ahead and authorize StreamYard so that you can comment. Otherwise, you can post, you can give us a comment on LinkedIn and we will reply. I will reply to that when we see it. All right. Sounds good. So let's just jump into this content that I have. That it's going to be a little framework that I use with my consulting clients. It means a lot to me. I call it the Leading with Love Emotionally Intelligent Leadership Framework. This L.O.V.E. And to me, I would say that I run into a lot of interesting exchanges with clients and with people when I talk about bringing love into work. And so I think about this number of 58%. What is 58? It's not 25, which was an interesting stat that I saw last week. 25% are the number of people in the United States that actually give their dog a Valentine. Did you give your dog a Valentine last week? I did not give my pup a Valentine last week, but I did give him extra head scratches and belly rubs. 58% are the number of workers in the United States who feel cared for at work. And that means there's yet about another 42 or so percent of people who don't actually feel cared for at their jobs. And I just told a story to a woman yesterday about a facilitated session that I had with a client. They engaged me because they felt that their workplace was at risk of huge employee turnover. There was a number of complaints around poor management, around toxic culture, microaggressions. And so we led this 6-part facilitated series. And part of the feedback that we heard was about also low levels of trust. And so about the 3rd or 4th employee session, a gentleman came on to the microphone and what he said was, I spend so much of my time at work, whether physically in the office now that we're in hybrid or in meetings or just at this computer, that I want to know that I'm cared for at work. And I think what really rippled through the organization was that people didn't really expect him, based on who he was, to be the one to name this sentiment that was held by so many people in the organization. This desire to be cared for. And in fact, I think that we often don't want to or don't think about care being something that's supposed to be a part of work. That's for after hours. That's for your friends or for your family. That's outside of the workplace. But now, even with the U.S. Surgeon General coming out with their report in October 2022 that said, actually, work is making people sick. That workplaces need to factor in mental health and employee well-being if they want to be profitable and productive. So let's actually dig into care and what I call love and what we as leaders need to do to foster this idea of love and care as a strategic design element and a healthy, thriving workplace culture. All right? How's that sound? So let's dig right into it. I want to welcome you for coming to this LinkedIn Live. My name is Chrysta Wilson. I'm the CEO and founder of Wilson and Associates Coaching and Consulting. We're almost next month, a 16-year-old consulting and coaching practice that focuses on organizational development, strategy, leadership development, and culture change. And woven throughout all of that is diversity, equity, and inclusion. I'm also a coach, a certified coach, a baker, a scuba diver, and an aunt to 14. And I'm deeply committed to joy and to rest. And you can see here, we've served so many clients, from government agencies to associations to foundations, all of whom have come to us to help us really navigate this intersection of leadership and culture and diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so all of the tips and strategies that I share with you are going to be coming from that nexus of expertise. So when I talk to you today about culture change and leadership, I want to tell you this knowledge, or share this knowledge in a kind of a 3-part story arc. The first, I want to talk to you about why love. The next, I want to kind of call in a little Tina Turner, and I want to tell you, what's love got to do with it? And then the third, I want to show you and ask you, how will you show the love? So let's dig into part 1, why love? I actually talked to an HR director last year, and she said, Chrysta, you're going to get us into some sticky territory talking about love at work. We just did our mandated sexual harassment training. And I want you to know that this is not what I'm talking about. I'm calling in bell hooks and Martin Luther King, who talked about this non-sentimental kind of love, but really love as a strategy. But love also this idea of emotion and care and compassion. This is what we're talking about as an equity strategy. I want to invoke my own ancestors and my dad and me to paint this picture. So if you were to think about a kind of life that you want, that included farm fresh produce, and you wanted to be able to go to your own backyard and to pick carrots and fresh lettuces and maybe fruits and cucumbers and apples and all the things, you would know that now you have to start plotting what you're going to plant and when. And you're going to have to make sure that your soil is healthy and that your soil has the nutrients and it has, mulch on top so that things don't get scorched. And you also have to make sure that things are planted beside each other that really go together. And then once you've got your soil together, you've got your seeds or seedlings planted, then you actually have to care for the things. Are they getting enough water when they need them? Are they getting too much sun? Maybe they need a sunshade. Are they going to need to get food over the course of the time from planting to harvest? And ultimately, everything that you have done, from designing the planting plan, to getting the soil ready, to spacing the seeds just right, to thinking about its companion planting, to the watering, to the fertilizing, to even thinking about where are those slugs or the other bugs that might eat the leaves. All of that is you thinking of care as an action so that you get the harvest that you want. You don't just get the good harvest. You actually have to have a strategy to yield the harvest. So a good, equitable, and inclusive culture where employees are thriving is the exact same way. You have to have good soil. You also have to have a strategy for engagement and care and cultivation. And you have to be checking in along the way to be making sure that everything is well cared for. Sometimes, in my experience, we take better care and do more intentional nurturing of inanimate objects or our gardens than we do our people or our culture. And this is why I created my LOVE framework to give us 4 actionable ways of thinking, being, and doing to cultivate the kinds of workplace cultures where not only people thrive, but we can measurably track our own leadership actions to know that we will harvest good culture and that our people will be doing well. So I'm going to share with you the framework right now. And that's what I say, what love has got to do with it. So here's that leadership framework. It starts with the L and it goes down to the E. So with the L, I invite you to listen openly and actively. That's the L. The O is offering support. The V is valuing employees and their contributions. And the E is empathizing and building emotional intelligence. Now, it sounds maybe pretty simple, but I'm going to actually show you what are some of the tactics and some of the ways we can embody and live out these values. So let's actually dig right into it. So the first is the L. So with this, I'm inviting my leaders that I work with, they're not mine, but I invite leaders who I partner with to listen openly and actively. Now, one of the challenges, particularly when we are in positions of leadership, it can be hard for us to listen openly and actively, especially if some of that open listening leads to us hearing things that we may not want to hear or that may be hard to hear. I just gave a training about an hour and a half ago inside of my membership program for leaders who are working on HR, culture change, or diversity, equity, inclusion. And we talked about some of the dominant culture habits that make it hard to lead DEI. And in one of those habits, we named defensiveness and right to comfort. And so one of the things that gets in the way of us listening openly is when we engage people to talk to us or share their feelings, and then we get uncomfortable or we're not open to feedback. And so we get defensive or we shut down or we push back. And this is a surefire way to minimize trust or to close down and to really make communication between our teams even worse. So here are some strategies for you to improve and enhance communication, to really build up the L of your empathetic and emotionally intelligent leadership skills. So first, there's a technique that I call parroting. Now, this is a true story. There's a long story about how this happened. Now, it could be one of the myths in Los Angeles says that there was once a pet store that caught on fire and all the animals got free, thank goodness, and the parrots who were in this shop, they got out of the shop before it burned down and they flew away. And that's how Los Angeles got the wild parrots that you can often hear between the west sides of Santa Monica all the way to the mountainous sides of Pasadena. Now, I don't know if that story is true, but what I will tell you is if you listen closely anywhere within those cities, sometimes you will see or hear these wild parrots. This is true. So I think about that story when I think about this active listening skill. It's called parroting. Parrots don't necessarily have their own human language, but what they do have is the ability to repeat back what you say. My neighbor next door has a parrot, and that parrot says, "What's up, dog?" And that parrot did not learn that phrase from the tropics. It's just mirroring, saying exactly what it heard its owner say. So if you want to practice your active listening skills, one of the things you can do is called parroting. So when your employee or team member says something to you, say it back exactly as you heard it using the exact words that you heard. There's nothing more affirming than hearing your words said back to you. And I can tell you, because it's one of my activators, one of my triggers, there's nothing more infuriating than for somebody to tell you what you said and it's not what you said. That's not how you demonstrate transformational and empathetic leadership. So parroting, great active listening skill. Another great active listening skill is paraphrasing. So sometimes folks will say, and they'll talk to you, they'll share their experiences or they'll describe a challenge that they're having, and it might be too much for you to parrot back. Perhaps they've talked for a minute or two and it was a lot of content. So paraphrasing and summarizing allows you to say, what I heard you say was, or what I thought I might have heard you say was, and then you give a summary. You put it in your own words. But this is why I love this next bullet point. Did I get that right? If you offer, did I get that right? It signals to the person that you're talking to that you know that while you may be a leader in that conversation and you may have some level of positional authority, that there's a chance, a very good one, that you didn't paraphrase properly. That perhaps in the filter of being a human being, you maybe missed the mark, and that you're giving them the invitation to correct you. This is also another great strategy for balancing the power dynamics that can exist in a leadership and supervisee relationship. And that power dynamic can emerge not only from the positional power, but from tenure power if you've been in that position longer, or from other social identities like gender, race, ethnicity, age, language spoken, etc. So did I get that right is a wonderful way to conclude a summarized recap of the conversation. So again, you want to lead with love. You want to have emotionally intelligent leadership. Listen openly and actively. It's a great strategy. Okay, let's get to the O. As an ICF certified coach, one who loves to lead with how can I be of service, like these LinkedIn Lives, I love this O. It is to offer support. So let's talk about this. So many of the people that I have provided leadership coaching to don't always see their role as a leader as one of a coach. And so I would offer to you, it's a good opportunity for you to analyze, how do you see the role of a leader and what is your leadership style? My invitation is that all leaders to a degree should see themselves as one who is coaching the people that they supervise, that they should see their role as someone who is helping to provide professional development, and one who is there to offer some level of support. I often tell this story. When I was a young senior director of an organization and I was managing both a 5-member team, I had a $4 million or so budget, and I was working at the intersection of community engagement and public policy, actual laws governing the county. And I was stumped one day trying to navigate the systems change work we were trying to do with the county, the community engagement, our large staff, some fiscal issues. And I had come up with some level of a solution, but I needed a thought partner. I needed a sounding board. I wasn't looking for, someone to fix it for me, but I needed a thought partner. I needed some support. And so I looked to my supervisor. The person was the head of our organization. Ideally, to me, this is someone who was in that position because they had decades more experience than me. And so I approached the person for thought partnership to provide leadership. And what they told me, and they shut me down, in fact, was that they didn't want to be a part of the sausage making. And in fact, they wanted just to be presented with the final beautiful sausages. And I remember in that moment, what it made me feel was that I should have known the answer. I shouldn't have to seek support because I was a person in leadership already. And I was made to feel insignificant. And I know now that was likely not their intention, but that was the impact. And that's why I ride so hard for the people that I coach and for the leaders who contract me to help develop them into transformational leaders. Because we can have an impact on the people who we supervise and not even know the negative impact that we've had. So when we want to become emotionally intelligent leaders, offering support is one of the simplest things that we can do. We can be removing barriers for our people. We can be providing professional development. And that can come in the form of mentorship, coaching, and even offering training, either formal training, we can train them ourselves, or even connect them to training resources. And when we offer support, this actually enhances morale and it also increases productivity. And so if we're a company that really is about, measuring performance and productivity, and we want high performing teams and individuals, offering support is actually one of the fast track ways to get to high productivity. Not any other kind of incentive shouldn't be the only thing we focus on. Support is a wonderful way to do that too. Okay, so that's the O. Let's talk about V, value. And value is something that I talk about in two ways. I talk about value in terms of we actually need to do a better job at valuing our employees and the contributions that they make. And we also, this is a little bit of a switch. This is infused by our equity approach. We need to make work valuable to them. So it's twofold. We need to value the contributions that our employees are making. And these companies, our organizations need to be valuable to our people because they can go anywhere. And if work is not providing meaning and value to our people, they will leave. And that's been an ongoing trend since 2020's Great Resignation. So much of the data is showing that people want to not only feel recognized and be recognized, but they want to find meaning in their work. There was a stat that talked about, I think over 70% of people find meaning in their jobs. So they need to find value and meaning in the work that they're doing. And so as a leader, that's something that we can co-create with our people. We can ask them, what lights you up? What would give this job value to you? And then we can co-create it. We can actually talk to our people and assess, what are your gifts, your skills, your talents? And then when we see those show up and be demonstrated at work, recognize our people for the talents, gifts, skills, and abilities that they not only have, but they are gifting and showing and utilizing in their roles. This is the double whammy of value. And I think we can do a better job at the latter. I was just on a podcast maybe 3 weeks ago. And one of the core parts of this organization that hosts this podcast, they focus on employee recognition. And largely employee recognition looks like, what are the kinds of gifts that we can give people? So, the tchotchkes kinds of things. But what we know is that there's been so many data points I've seen in the last year that people don't just want gifts. And I think the stat was like 70% of people being underwhelmed by their employer gifts. It's that people don't just want stuff anymore. They're less impressed by the branded fleece or the coffee cup or even, the $30 Visa card, although those things are nice. But if their employer told them or their supervisor told them, I know how hard you worked on getting that report done, and I loved how you used your gift for storytelling to craft that intro. That was excellent. That goes so much further than that branded fleece. So let's talk about E and empathy. And I use the two E's here because there's both the empathy, which is so critical. And to me, it is one of the soft skills of leadership that is actually going to be one of the most important leadership competencies that leaders must build in 2024. And it's one of 5 leadership emotional intelligence domains that I want to highlight here. So if we're going to demonstrate this, love leadership framework, we've got to show empathy to others. We have to demonstrate that we understand the feelings and the emotions of others. And one way that we can do this is also to get curious before we get judgmental. Now, in most of the groups that I work with, when I create group agreements, I always invite this group agreement. I always say, suspend judgment and get curious. Because this is one way that we can begin to build empathy very tactfully. Here's an example. I cannot concurrently hold a judgment and also be curious. I cannot say peanut butter is nasty and also hold curiosity, wondering what peanut butter tastes like, right? You can't hold two things of a judgment and a curiosity. I can't hold that person is a lazy worker, a judgment, and hold curiosity. I wonder what's going on with this person that's had them be late on their assignment. So empathy and curiosity go hand in hand. And for our more emotionally intelligent leaders, we want to invite you to get curious as opposed to being judgmental. This is the empathy part. And I will tell you, more often than not, the curiosity gets us more understanding. It gets to the heart of the challenge that we're witnessing as a leader. And it helps us co-create a solution and a pathway forward, pathway to high performance, a pathway to problem solving, a pathway to so many of the other side of the problems that we've observed as leaders. The pathway can come from getting curious and not leading with judgmental and trying to find a punitive response to holding people accountable. So get curious. That's how we can build our empathy muscle. I add emotional intelligence to this E too. And there are 5 domains to emotional intelligence. I train and I coach people to build all 5. And there's one that I want to call out in particular. It's manage and regulate your own emotions. When we are leading inside of an organization, there are so many things that we have to manage. We're managing budgets and policy. We're managing up, we're managing down. And we are often not regulating our own emotions. So it is true, we are humans. We're going to get activated and triggered and frustrated. And there are going to be times when we're going to, if I can use the slang, going to want to pop off. We're going to want to get angry and argue and get defensive. And so it's going to require so much work for us to actually pause and get grounded and actually take a breath and then move into what I call as a coach, our aspirational leadership self and say, how would I want to respond if I could respond in the best way possible? Because we actually can respond in that way. We get to choose. But when we're reacting, we remove the ability of that choice. This is what's possible when we have a mastery of emotional intelligence, especially our own emotional self-regulation. So this is a critical skill for leading with love. Another one here is we need to be mindful of our impact. You know, I come from a family of sarcastic wizardry, I would say, but also I come from a family that it was not uncommon to experience verbal violence. You know, we're an arguing kind of family. And so it was a skill that many of us learned from childhood to argue and to fight and to debate and to cut, as we would say, to the white meat, to use harmful language, to in some ways eviscerate people, and to think about the impact way later, if ever. And so I had to unlearn that and to relearn to think of my impact first. The idea of think before you speak, that's actually something I work on a regular basis. You can ask my team of consulting partners and they'll tell you too, well, we're always talking about impact because it's so important to me to actually not create harm. It doesn't mean that I'm perfect, but I'm giving the example that it is a constant work in practice I am a constant work in practice, but this idea about being mindful of your impact is such a critical leadership skill that I don't think we talk about enough. And then the last one I want to mention here under the E is that we must be mindful of our power dynamics. That's likely a training for another day. But when I'm talking about power dynamics, we have in our training and consulting ecosystem, we have a proprietary tool called the Wheel of Marginalized and Advantaged Identities. And on that wheel, on the outside, there are 18 of the most kind of closely identified 18 social identities and the categories might be neurodivergence, body size, mental health status, race, sexual orientation, gender identity, etc. And on the outside of that circle, the next level in, those are the identities under those categories that are most often marginalized in the US context. And in the center of that circle are the identities that are closer in proximity to power. And there's another tool that talks about it in an organizational context. So who has power often inside of organizations? So in an exercise that we do with clients, we invite you to think about what are the power dynamics that may show up in your supervision or in your team. As a leader, we have a responsibility to know and to name those power dynamics so that we can do our best to not reinforce those negative power dynamics and to bring a level of equity into all of our interactions. That's also how we can lead with love. We can balance empathy, and we can bring really a heightened sense of emotional intelligence. And when we do that, we create more psychologically safe spaces. Okay, so that was the L, that was the O, and that was the V, and that was the E. So now I want to talk to you a couple of tips. I've already shared some, but just a few more tips about how you can show the love. And every time I say this phrase, I think of a woman. Her name was Corliss Bennett. When I was at USC, it's a PWI in Southern California, Los Angeles. And there weren't very many Black students on campus. So she said, when we see other Black students so that we know that we belong at a university that's predominantly white, we can just show the love. It's doing external actions to build connections and foster inclusion. And she even had a gesture. She did this to just show the love. So I invite you, if you want to, if you're watching the playback, just show the love. So here's something that you can do to show the love as a leader. First, be vulnerable. I want to call in that gentleman from our first session where he said, when I'm at work, I want to know that I'm being cared for, that people here care about me. That took a lot of vulnerability. So as a leader, you can share, I care for everybody here and I want you to feel cared for. If you don't, come talk to me. You can also share, I want to be cared for too. I want to know that y'all care about me. That takes vulnerability. Vulnerability also can look like, I know I haven't done a great job of making you all feel that you are cared for, and I want to do better. When we are vulnerable and when we tell the truth, that is the perfect bridge to trust building and to psychological safety, because it's actually coming from a human to human, heart to heart place that fosters relatability. That's the best strategy. It's telling the truth. Okay, here's a second tip. Lead with curiosity and care and compassion. So sometimes I can be a word nerd, and I looked up a couple of years ago, what's the difference between care and compassion? because you often hear those words together, but I thought they were a synonym. So why are we saying care and compassion? Are they the same thing? They're slightly different. And so I want to share with you the distinction that I'm making based on just the way that I'm understanding the words. When I say lead with care, care is actually taking action. It's a verb. So I want you to lead by taking action rooted in your desire to make things better for your people. So what action can you take? The doing something, taking an action, making a change. You're actually moving something, right? So it's a movement that you're doing, an actual action. And then compassion. This is an emotional response. So if you lead with compassion, think about how can you express your emotions? What's the emotional response that you can offer that will demonstrate the heart-led leadership that you want to bring to a space? Now, remember, I want to also name, we all lead and emote differently. And so for you, it may be more natural or more you to show your care through the action. And for some of you, it may be easier or more you to demonstrate through the emotional response. And this is why I want to kind of make this distinction. But if you get curious and you ask people what they need, that may also lead you to know what's needed in that moment. Perhaps it's just the emotional response, and maybe what's needed is a policy change or a new program or some other action that the organization can take. Here's another thing that you can do is be an upstander. An upstander is opposed to a bystander, which is more passive. So you witness harm as a bystander, but you may do nothing about it. An upstander is if you are witnessing harm happening to your employees, how do you stand up against it? You stand with them, beside them, and you ask them, how can I be an active supporter and ally, disruptor with you? So be an upstander for equity, for inclusion, and against the harm that they may be experiencing. This is a great way to lead with love. I always say that love and care is great. And if we actually truly care about people, that's the engine for our DEI efforts. I can't care about my trans colleague and then watch anti-trans policies take place in our organization, like banning using our pronouns in our email signature. I can't be that person's manager and not take a stand against that. So this is an example of being an upstander. And it connects to this next one, which is about using your voice. So as a leader, how can you use your voice, your actual voice, or your email, or your ideas, or your platform, or your power? And power comes in many forms. It can be positional power, the power that you have by the position in the organization. You also may have power by tenure. You've been in the organization 5 or 10 years, so you're vested. The time you have in the organization, that counts for something. You may also have power because you're a charismatic leader. People listen to you, they like you. Your relationships with others gives you the ability of influence. So whatever power you have to support the needs and the will of your employees, use it. This is another great way for you to lead with love. So here's my question for you if you're watching this live or you're watching on a replay. I want you to think about how can you demonstrate one of these actions this week? How can you listen openly and actively? How can you offer support? How can you show that you value your employees and their contributions? Or how can you help co-create meaning and make this work and this company of value to your people? And lastly, maybe you want to focus on the E. So, how can you show empathy and build your own emotional intelligence so that you can lead with love in this fortified way? So, take a moment and think about how you can take action and demonstrate leading with love this week. For me, I'm going to focus on listening openly and actively. We're running a number of projects this week. I'm going to need to lean onto my team even more heavily than normal. And I want to make sure that I'm listening to them and asking them what they need, as opposed to just telling them what I need. So, this is my homework to make sure that I'm being a supportive and empathetic leader. So, this is it. This is the Lead with Love framework. It's 4 tactics to help you lead in a more embodied and emotionally intelligent way. If you have questions about this framework, feel free to post them in the LinkedIn comments, or you can always send me a DM on LinkedIn or comments on my page. I'm happy to respond to them. And you can always find me and my team at wilson-and-associates.com, or you can just click on our profile on LinkedIn. You can find us there. We'll be doing these LinkedIn Lives every month to share strategies, insights, our research, things that we believe will be helpful and useful for leaders like you who are trying to just chart the course to build your leadership skills or build workplace cultures where DEI and people can thrive. And so I'm so glad to be in virtual community with you and looking forward to seeing what questions and what support we can offer to all of our leaders, both our current clients and our new friends here on LinkedIn. So with that, may y'all be well, and may you have a good rest of your day, and hopefully staying dry and staying warm, because these winter storms are something else. All right, take care, everyone.